And I would suggest to start now, because every minute is so valuable. So we would like to take every single advantage of it and hear as much as possible from our guest speaker, who will be inspiring us today in this motivational session. We have Bruce Edwards with us. And there is so much to say about Bruce. He is one of the pioneers in developing mediation as a tool for resolving commercial disputes. And being a full-time professional mediator since 1985, Bruce has helped mediation gain widespread acceptance in the United States legal system. He played a central role in creating GEMS ADR and he runs so many training sessions, disseminate practical skills, both in the United States and overseas. And today's forum is a bright example of this best practice sharing, because Bruce is going to share his experience with our participants from all around the world. In 2014, together with his wife, Susan, who is also here with us, they founded Edwards Mediation Academy, where they run interactive online sessions that are recognized by many experts around the globe. And those courses are recognized as a golden standard in mediation training. That's why I would also like to express my words of sincere gratitude on behalf of the Ukraine's Mediation Academy. Thank you, Bruce, and thank you, Susan, because thanks to your warm hearts and your support, now Ukrainians have an opportunity to join these courses. You opened and made available the most important course for Ukrainians now, and they're getting trained on this. So we were sharing a lot of information in the chat. I'm not going to be repetitive. I just want to once again thank you very much. You know, it's not even partnership, but it's good friendship, I'm sure. These are the people who are always close, ready to help. We don't have to ask every time as we need support. This is an incredible series of webinars that Bruce is doing, and he interviews so many top speakers from the mediation realm in order to provide additional support to them in their challenging conditions that they have to face today. So no more time that I'm going to take anymore. Ready to listen to you, Bruce. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Luisa, for the kind words. Congratulations again on the program you've put together and all the good work you continue to do. This week, I've given a lot of thought to what it is I might be able to offer this group by way of inspiration. And I've really struggled because you go through so much on a daily basis. And it dawned on me at one point this week why I was struggling. And I was struggling because it's really ironic that as you look to me for inspiration, it's really you who's providing the inspiration. It's those of you who get up every day in the face of an imaginable conflict and find ways not just to get through your daily lives and all that that entails, but also to improve yourselves and each other through these mediation processes and the training and teaching that you all do. And so when you say, where's the inspiration? I say, look in the mirror, because it really starts with you, and I feed off of that. Look, I don't need to tell you that people are dying in Ukraine and people are dying around the world because many haven't learned the important lessons that bring us together. Certainly, they haven't begun to master them. The lessons that we need to focus on of collaborative problem solving over violence, the lessons on how to move through complexity with curiosity, the lessons of civil discourse and respectful dialogue over shouting over each other, the lessons of empathy and empathetic listening, and above all, the lessons of how do we pursue our most noblest of attributes, our shared humanity. Those are all lessons that bring us together today and continue to bring us together as we search for answers and change, not just within Ukraine, but around the world. So we hear about violence and conflict in places as distant as Myanmar, South Sudan, Lebanon, Gaza, Israel, the Middle East entirely, and certainly those of you in Ukraine who experience it daily. And it's easy to get discouraged. It's easy at times to say, what can I do? I'm just one person after all. How can I make a difference? And I'm here reminded of a quote, strangely enough, from a children's author in the United States. Many of you may be familiar with the Dr. Seuss books, but Dr. Seuss in one of the books said, to the world, you may just be one person, but to one person, you may be the world. And I'm reminded of that quote when I think about what a difference one person can make. And so I've somewhere along the line stumbled on this idea of the power of one. And the power of one is what motivates me to continue pursuing what I do in hopes that I can have the broadest impact I possibly can. And what is the power of one? Well, the power of one is founded on the idea that within each of us, we have certain talents and powers, sometimes unknown, for many of us, not completely tapped. And the challenge is to first identify and cultivate and ultimately share that power with others in our community. And how do you do that? Well, you begin by trying to identify your passion. What is it that keeps you awake at night, unable to go to sleep because there's something around you that troubles you? What is it that gets you up in the morning because you're so enthusiastic about starting the day in pursuit of getting a challenge addressed? And from there, it's finding your skill set. It's finding out what you do better than most and developing that, honing that skill. And in that process, marrying your skill set with your passion will enable you to come to a position where you can truly access the power of one. I'll give you an example of passion. I've given it to many of you before, but it's a story that bears repeating. In 1969, a young girl, at that time Celia Elworthy, living in the UK, was sitting in her family living room watching a grainy black and white TV screen that was showing Russian invasion of Czechoslovakia as tanks were literally running down the streets. And she went upstairs and she began packing her suitcase, and her mom followed her upstairs and said, "Honey, where are you going?" She said, "The people on the TV need my help. They're in trouble." And her mom, being as wise as she was, said, "Well, honey, I think what we need to do is help prepare you for the day when you can truly be of help to those people. So let's unpack your bag and talk about where we go from here." And that began the life of a woman who's committed her life to peace building. And now Dr. Celia Elworthy, a 3-time Nobel Peace Prize finalist, a noted author and teacher of peace building techniques, author of the book, A Business Plan for Peace, is one person who has made a difference in the lives of thousands of African women searching for empowerment, those engaged in the conversation about nuclear disarmament, and in individual communities around the world. Her lessons have brought a greater sense of peace and well-being to many. That is but one example. I'll share with you my story. Many of you have heard it before. It's fairly simple. I was in college studying psychology. I knew I wanted to go to law school, but as many of that age, not really well defined in my career path. I did go to law school. I was trained, like so many of you who are lawyers, that conflict was resolved through litigation, a formalized, ritualized way of dispute resolution. And like a carpenter armed with only one tool, a hammer, I treated all conflict with that tool, litigation. And yet, as I began work as a young lawyer, I found that the lessons of litigation were incongruent with the lessons that I had learned in psychology. That what we really needed to do was, in these commercial conflicts, not separate people, but bring people together, and not promote adversarial relationships, but really try and look for common solutions, things that had never really been done in the world of litigation. And so I literally resigned my partnership, much to the chagrin of my parents and friends, who I told I was leaving the practice of law to begin a profession that at the time didn't exist. And together with a partner, we opened a very small shop where I brought my sister in at night to help us type up letters, because in those days we didn't have computers. And we spent the days knocking on doors with law firms that would talk to us about this idea of bringing people together who were embroiled in commercial litigation to engage a dialogue that we facilitated. And thus began our somewhat humble career in the world of professional mediation. And we started bringing people into common space to engage in dialogue. Much to the lawyer's surprise, we brought them into the same room, and we shared across the table conversations with each other about how disputes had arose. And those conversations that were unscripted, they were at times confrontational, they were definitely messy, at times emotional, but through it all, strange things started to happen. We started to see people understand each other a bit more clearly. We started to see people open their minds to the possibility of different perspectives. We saw people who became agents of change and to assist and look for ways to solve problems, not just perpetuate them. And so it's through this sort of magical transformation of the mediation process that I became further emboldened. And over the course of what's now almost a 40-year career in dispute resolution, I've worn many hats. I've worn the hat of a business leader and developer as I've set about to develop 4 different mediation companies, including, as Luisa said, the one that has gone on to be the largest in the United States, with over 500 professional neutrals, mediating over 20,000 disputes each year in the United States. As Luisa said, I also, with my wife Susan, co-founded the Edwards Mediation Academy, which I think is the first of its kind platform of trying to put these important lessons on a computer and available to people around the world, those who can't afford the time and money to travel to meet in person, now have access to the same kinds of lessons we're sharing with you today. I've certainly devoted a significant amount of my career to teaching, and I've taught in higher institutions of learning, including Pepperdine, the highest rated dispute resolution degree program in the United States. And I've literally taught several thousand, not just aspiring mediators and law students, but tried to hone the skills of those mediators who have practiced their skill for many years and are looking to improve and advance their profession. And as Luisa said, despite all of that, my real day job is mediating disputes. And so almost every day for the last almost 40 years, I've been involved in dispute resolution on a daily basis. I worked yesterday in a distant city of Los Angeles, and following this program today, I'll flip the switch and start a mediation process as well. And so these are lessons I speak of not theoretically, but these are lessons that I speak of from daily experience. And I share my story with you, not to promote myself, not to look for accolades, not to pat myself on the back. I'm at a stage in my career where I'm not looking to take a victory lap. I'm hopefully, health permitting, have plenty of time ahead to continue sharing these important lessons. But what I hope you take away from this story is really that any of us can find within ourselves the ability to make a difference. And when I stepped away from the practice of law into the darkness, the unknown of trying to develop a new profession, and against 250 years of litigation tradition in the United States, as a 30-something-year-old with no professional gravitas. I was not a retired judge. I was not a political leader. I was not somebody whose name was known to many. I certainly didn't have venture capital backing or significant economic reservoirs. I was just armed with an idea and an enthusiasm for taking that idea and sharing it with other people, and sort of breathing on those embers in a way that tried to develop a flame of motivation for people around me. And over the last 40 years, I've been joined by many in my story who have added immeasurably to the success of mediation in the United States. And now, in a relatively short period of time compared to our 250 years of history of dispute resolution through litigation, we've changed the landscape of how lawyers and courts approach dispute resolution in the United States, so that everybody who has a dispute now goes through mediation before they go to court or before they have a trial. But let me share with you some more stories, because I think we learn a lot from each other in the stories themselves. I'll use names to personalize. I don't expect you to remember names, nor is that as critical as certainly understanding what individuals have been able to accomplish. I certainly know that many of you have met my dear friend, Susan, and my dear friend, Dr. Lori Layden, a trauma therapist who's made it her life mission to try and bring some degree of peace and healing to those who have gone through the most unimaginable tragedies in their lives. And from school shootings to Aborigine tribes in distant parts of the globe, Lori has spent her career trying to bring help one person at a time to those affected by trauma. There's another friend of ours, Rob Fursh, who had an idea about establishing a nonprofit in Washington, D.C. called Convergence. And I have with me this morning his new book called From Conflict to Convergence. We'll make sure you get the particulars, but it's about how one searches for common ground, how one brings together people on the most disparate topics, separating groups within the United States, issues as volatile as gun control, reimagining health education, redefining prison reform, border control, immigration, the types of issues that occupy the front pages of the newspapers with people separating themselves based on their positions. Rob has created a structure of bringing people together for collaborative problem solving. And his book talks about that step-by-step approach to how one does that within their communities. His co-author, Mariah Levinson, by way of sharing another story, in her home state, where there was the unfortunate death of an African-American in hands of police custody, as all too often happens in the United States, and community outrage erupted in violence. And Mariah brought people together in community conversations where she used these skills that we all talk about to facilitate a dialogue, dial down the rhetoric, help people understand how this could have happened, and search for ways to sort of bring about peace in the short term and longer term solutions. Another colleague of ours who we've had the privilege of working with and meeting over the years is Douglas Knowles. Douglas Knowles is a mediator who's made it his life's mission to bring these lessons into prisons, strangely enough for many to contemplate. And so he goes into these prisons and works with prisoners, many of whom who seemingly would have no hope in their life. Meaning, many of these prisoners are in prison for the rest of their lives and in environments of potential violence. And yet, by bringing these lessons to prisoners on how to resolve disputes, he's been able to add a measure of comfort to people's lives and a measure of hope to people's lives where before they had none. I'm reminded of a woman who began a program called Living Room Conversations. You can Google that topic. And Living Room Conversations is just that. She set up a mechanism for people in different communities to bring neighbors together in living room conversations, to share in a safe environment different perspectives on topics that impact that community, both small and large. And so in that fashion, tackling issues in a way that is manageable for those that don't feel they can make a broader impact, yet still have an opportunity to make an impact within their local community. I'll give you another story, one that's only sort of recently taking shape. My prior company has a fellowship program. There may be some fellows on this call who have participated in the James Weinstein Fellows Program. And one of our recent graduates, Victor Baba, is a refugee from South Sudan who literally fled South Sudan with the clothes on his back and ended up in Kenya. And now he goes back to refugee camps in Kenya, where there are diaspora populations from tribal communities throughout Africa. And he sets up courses on conflict resolution and mediation within those refugee camps and sends out his graduates as emissaries to their broader communities to try and reflect peace-building techniques and ways to create dialogue to avoid the tensions between tribal communities forced to exist in refugee camp conditions. So these are but a few of the people that Susan and I have run across in our careers, just a few of the stories that hopefully exemplify ideas on how one can make a difference. I'll talk about some of the places we've been and things we've done in different communities that I think further illustrate what can happen when one tries to harness the power of one. And I'm reminded as I keep saying that phrase, on my desk in my home office, I have a plaque that has a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, which asks, "What have I done to help others today?" And that really is a recognition that we have within us this power to try and affect change one person at a time. But some of the programs that we've been involved with, community mediation programs, one of our favorite topics, because we've now been there 5 times and graduated almost 1,000 mediators in the country of Rwanda. And after one of the most horrific episodes in human history, the genocide, they've had to rebuild their society from the ground up. And part of that rebuilding was to tap into their ancient Abunzi system of community-based mediation. And we've been able to try and help them tap into that community and those skills, to take those skills into a broader setting of courts with court-annexed mediation, training judges and registrars and attorneys and bankers and insurance professionals and a variety of business leaders and church leaders, all with the idea of bringing these lessons first into the court system and ultimately into broader society. And we've been first-party witness to this change in a relatively short period of time over the last 4 or 5 years, where they've now adopted these lessons into their court system. They've developed public policies supporting the use of mediation at all levels of government, and they're really on their way toward institutionalizing these lessons. Crossing religious divides is a complicated conversation and one that lies at the heart of so many disputes around the world. We're currently involved in a program in Lebanon trying to train mediators in bridge building techniques to look for ways to try and create dialogues between different religious groups in hopes of lessening some of the conflict that's occurring currently in that country. Certainly, there are those in this country who have been engaged in bringing mediation skills into the corporate environment. And this idea of ombuds participating in the largest institutions in the United States, from universities to hospitals to high-tech companies to governments, people whose sole job now is to identify and take on conflict within organizations, an accepted part of the profession now, unheard of almost 30 years ago. There are people who spend their lives now devoted to bringing these important lessons to the next generation. And I can't say enough about the importance of that for those who are steeped in conflict. Sometimes the only inspiration we can find is that with a younger new generation with a different mindset, that they'll wake up and appreciate the value of these same skills. We have people who teach grade school children and teach grade school children in the value of peer mediation, so that children on the playground or in the classroom can literally assist their classmates in dispute resolution techniques. And in higher education, we've helped develop programs to develop curriculum for those teachers going through teaching colleges. So along with the basic lessons that students need to learn, we can introduce conflict resolution skills as an equally important technique. I often ask people in courses, how many of you have had classes in writing? Of course, everybody raises their hand. I ask how many people have had classes in reading? Of course, everybody raises their hand. I ask, who's had courses in listening? And the room goes silent, because people haven't been properly trained in how we need to learn to listen to each other, how we learn to listen with empathy, how we learn to listen with curiosity, how we learn to listen by reserving judgment, and ultimately how we learn to connect with people, not simply to await our turn to speak so we can correct them. There are ultimately ways to try and introduce these same lessons into governments. That's a more challenging task, to be sure. I just returned this spring from a teaching trip to China, and many asked me, how can you go to China? Just as I was asked years ago, how can I train judges from Saudi Arabia or other countries where at the government level, at least, there are allegations of abuse, human rights abuses, and certainly an approach to governing people that's different, if not inconsistent, with the lessons we teach. And I told my children as I was preparing to leave for China, I said, how can we not help the people of China? It's one thing to say we may or may not be able to impact government, but does that mean we should give up on trying to impact the lives of its citizens? And maybe, just maybe, by impacting the lives of citizens, we can start to bring about broader, more societal change. And so that's the impetus, that's the motivation that I find in really trying to bring about change. So my takeaway from all of this is that we do need to develop this power of one. We need to begin to think about ways that we can make a difference, first within our communities, for those who may shy away from thinking that they can make broader societal change. So start small, nurture an idea, discuss it with friends. Better still, bring those friends on board and into your dream. Collaborate with others, because the collective power is a multiplier in this profession. And understand the words of Nelson Mandela when he said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." I encourage you to think about these lessons. Susan and I, as Luisa has said, will be available to you today and beyond as we're in this together. Those of you more on the front lines in your current environment. But just know that not just me and not just Susan, there are many others around the world who support you in your cause, and particularly who stand ready to bring these lessons to your front door and really to collaborate with you in trying to bring about change in your individual lives. So we wish you the best. I'd like to open this up and invite questions. I know I've introduced a lot to you today, but as Steve Jobs once said, we're here to make a dent in the universe. Why else even be here? And I'd like to invite you to share your thoughts and ideas on ways that you can make a dent in the universe. And just ask questions, please. There's nothing out of bounds, and we're happy to address whatever questions that you have. So thank you for your generous gift of time. Thank you, Luisa, for inviting me to share these thoughts and ideas and stories with people. And I hope in all of this, they found some modest amount of inspiration.
Bruce, I want to sincerely thank you very much. At the very beginning, I had to turn off my camera because you hit the bullseye, really, by what you have, by how you have described what we feel today, and what really encourages us to wake up in the morning, stand up and do something. There's a feeling that you have affinity to something great, and a new day is not just a new day for pain. This is a new day to do something good, to support someone. to give someone a hope. And this is the reality that we witness today. And if we are together, we indeed can multiply all this. That's why we didn't want to have this webinar format. That's why we wanted to show the speaker first, and now we can multiply the feeling of support, the sense of community. And even though we had a relatively short period of time for your intervention, you managed to inspire us, share experience, and outline some of the challenges that you have faced in your lifetime and we face on a daily basis. You have told us about so many good things that you are doing around the world. One should never stop, continue to share the good. And this is like a chain reaction. You smiled on somebody's face, somebody else will smile back to you, and it can roll over all over the place. Thank you. Thank you for focusing our attention that there is a power of one, and every one of us can do something for the better of all. Thank you so much.
Those are great comments, Luisa. And I don't want people to think that my path has been without challenges, certainly nothing like your challenges, but to bring about change, to shift the paradigm of thinking requires a lot of effort. It requires understanding that people will close their door in your face and say no. And that will happen time and again. But on that day that somebody opens the door and invites you in, you may in fact change the life. And the goal there is to follow that thread wherever it leads. And again, you know me, Luisa, to know my fondness for quotes. One of my favorite quotes is, "Long after the final no, there lies a yes. And on that yes, the future world depends." It's a testament to the importance of fortitude and perseverance at a time where you will be distraught, you will be discouraged, you may be even thinking about quitting whatever path you're on. And I can't say enough the importance of staying with it, finding strength in each other's company and spirit, and persevering, because in that perseverance, not only are you improving the lives of others, but here's the lesson: you're making yourself a better person along the way. Let me ask questions or answer questions that people might have.
Так, давайте. Я пропоную, якщо є бажання, можна прямо
Okay,
підняти
if
руку.
there is somebody willing to raise hand
Було
and
запитання щодо
ask a question.
Сьюзан це вже не писала. У пані Валентини рука. Так,
I think
давайте.
Valentina has a question. Please go ahead, Valentina.
Сьюзан вже відповіла на питання щодо книги. І є ще
Susan
багато
has already
слів.
answered the question about the book, and there are so many words of sincere gratitude. Bruce,
Mr.
this is-
Bruce, thank you for the inspiring speech. I have the following question. Я правильно зараз обрала?
I'm only hearing the Ukrainian, I'm sorry.
I suppose I can continue in English. Okay. I have the following question. What eternal character traits, aspirations, or knowledge help a mediator to bring parties together during a conflict?
Great question. Yesterday in my mediation at 5 o'clock in the day, where it looked like we were making little progress, somebody turned to me and said, "Bruce, how can you be so patient in the face of such disappointment?" And I said, "Because I've been here before, because I know that this is, in many conflicts, a necessary stage that we must pass through, but that time and experience has shown me that we'll get through it. And so we need to stay the course. And not getting too high or too low on my journey is an important part of being an effective mediator, because I try and demonstrate the skills and techniques and mindset that I'm looking for people to emulate. And by staying focused, by staying calm, and by guiding the parties, I sort of become that touchstone in mediation that gives people license to have hope that we'll get through this difficult time. That and clearly listening. You've heard me say this in courses. I don't want to overlook that, because if I had one skill that I could impart to my children amongst all else, I would say, learn to be the best listener you can be. That will serve you well in life. It will connect you to others around you, and it will distinguish you from so many. And I often say, think about your own experiences in the people who are closest to you, those friends you count as the most dear, and think about the characteristics that distinguish them from so many others in your life. And I submit that one of the things that probably makes them stand out is that they actively listen to you and care about what you're saying. And that is a grateful opportunity to be able to share with a close friend. Thank you for that question.
Дякую, Брюсе. Чи є ще
Thank you so
запитання?
much, Bruce. Any other questions, please?
Ще можна встигнути одне запитання і будемо тоді
We
рухатися.
might want to answer just one more question and then we have to move on.
Є.
Oh, there is
Kirill.
one here. Please, Kirillo.
Доброго дня,
Good morning.
пане Брюсе.
And good
Дякую вам
afternoon.
за неймовірну
Everybody,
натхненну
good morning, Bruce. Thank you very much for
промову.
very inspiring
Я молодий медіатор.
story.
Нещодавно
I'm
їздив
just a young
по
mediator. I
українсько-тибетській
just
медіації.
graduated from the Ukraine's
І
Mediation
дуже
Academy,
цікавий,
and I'm
в
really
цьому напрямку
interested
своєї
in this
діяльності.
occupation.
Але
I want
мені
to
дуже
evolve and
сподобалась
develop.
і
But I
зацікавила
really
ваша
loved, and I got
історія
really
з приводу
interested in
Руанди
your story
щодо
about Rwanda,
медіації в конфлікті,
because
коли
you were saying that
суспільство є вже розколотим,
their society
і
is
нової побудови суспільства
so
записати
disrupted. I
варіації.
mean, due to the
Що, на вашу
conflicts.
думку, в такому процесі, і
What do you
відповідно, коли
think?
ви це робили, що
So
було
when you were
найтяжче
doing this, what was the most difficult
в
thing
цьому для
in
того, щоб досягти
Rwanda
якоїсь
in order to
якихось
somehow achieve the highest possible goal there? What was the most difficult one?
Another great question. First, we understood that we had an audience that was willing to be open-minded. I suppose, benefit of a genocide, unfortunately, is that so much of the older population had literally been killed off. All of the judges had died. And so by necessity, we were building from the ground up. And yet one of the challenges was there was no historical experience to draw from. So many of the elder statesmen in the society were no longer there. And obviously then trying to be an outsider, being sensitive to bringing lessons from the United States to a distant world, a distant culture, a different system, trying to make sure that we could bring the best lessons possible to bear and run them through a filter of local culture was the challenge. Not to come across as people that had all the answers, but rather as people who knew the right questions. And I use Rwanda as an example, both because of the tremendous success that took place or has continued to take place over a relatively short period of time, but also because I think there's some lessons there for our Ukrainian friends, that there will be a society in need of rebuilding from one block to the next, one community to the next. And I'm delighted to hear from the person asking questions that you are a recent graduate. Congratulations. Delighted to hear that you're relatively young, because we are in desperate need of people willing to commit their lives to this profession. And there is no there is no need to think that one has to be an elder statesman or stateswoman to be able to bring about change. Many of the people that I've mentioned, many of my colleagues, started very early in their lives in this profession and have stuck with it and brought about the kinds of changes that these stories illustrate. So I'm excited to hear that there are young people in this profession and encourage you to stay with it.
Дякую, Брюсе, за відповідь. Є ще рука від
Thank you very much. There is another question from Olga. Let it be the last question, please.
З Брюсом можна без
Yes,
обмежень
we can talk
спілкуватися,
for
але
hours,
я
if
не
not
хочу
days,
знову
with
ждати,
Bruce.
бо знаю, що
But
далі
I don't want to abuse anyone's time.
Just 1 minute. Thank you, Bruce, for your inspiring speech. I want to ask, actually, I should admit that people need to know previous experience to build better future. And we know this fact in Ukraine because of our history, but how not to stuck in horrible scenes of the past and how mediation can help in it.
To the extent I understand the question, I want to be careful because each person has decisions to make for themselves in life, obviously, about how one is rooted in past trauma versus one's ability to move forward, not to forget that trauma, but to think about it in a different way, and to think about it in a way going forward that doesn't let that trauma control you or direct your life. And so somewhere along the line, for each of us who have been through trauma, we have to think about what role are we going to allow it to play in our lives. Some people won't be able to get past it, unfortunately. That's human nature. The hope is, though, that for many, people will be able to remember that trauma, not forget it, but still find a path forward, a way to productively live their lives and bring about change and make their communities and their country a better place for everybody around them. And for those people, there's a special place in my heart because I know how difficult it is to get to that place. And yet we all must try, because really your future as an individual and your future as a country probably turns on your collective ability to sort of make that transition over time. I'm not here to preach. I'm not here to say if people can't do it, there's something wrong with them. That's not the message. The message is that there's an aspiration in all of us to try and continue moving forward. And those that will be successful will find that they've made this world a better place and their individual lives a better place as well. So I encourage you to keep trying in that regard. And again, look forward to supporting that journey as best we can.
Щиро дякую вам, Брюсе.
We want to cordially thank you, Bruce, for all your answers. They've been so honest. Thank you for sharing your experience. And in closing, I have to say that we have so many different insights. They are so diverse. And the key message that we've heard from you, that one should learn to listen, be able to listen. Do not allow trauma control your life and be in charge. And keep the course, because any change starts from an individual, and we have to do it and then join our efforts and do it together to multiply the effort. I want to thank you so much for having dedicated your life and continue to dedicate your life to make sure every new generation is better, and you are nurturing this new generation of mediators. Thank you very much for supporting us in this process and readiness to continue this. Thank you so much. And I'm going to ask, let's take a family picture. I know you have to leave soon because this is just the beginning of the day in the United States. So let us
ласка,
take a family
вмикайте
picture.
камеру,
We already done it
учасники.
on Zoom,
В
so
нас
please,
зараз
I'm going to encourage all the
ви
participants to
повинні
turn on their
натиснути на
cameras.
цю штучку, яка
As you
з'явиться
press
на екрані.
allow, you
Тільки
can see
тоді вона
host
вас
wants to
сфотографує. Ви
take
повністю
your photo
контролюєте
using group
цей
photo.
момент. Тобто,
So,
коли ви посміхнетеся,
please
будете дивитися у камеру,
smile
зможете
on the
сісти в якусь
camera,
гарну позу, то
just
тоді вас
relax,
фотографують. Зараз
and then we're
зробимо
gonna take a
пару
picture.
таких дублів.
So we'll try now.
Це трішечки займає часу, бо кожен фотографується в
It
своєму
takes just a
режимі,
bit of
але
time,
якість зовсім інша виходить.
but
Ще
we want to
один.
make sure we have great pictures.
Дякую. Лариса, у вас
Thank you.
рука бачу.
Larissa, did you have a question?
Це запитання чи що?
Is that a question or just
Зрозуміло.
raised hand accidentally? Fine.
Добре, тоді, Брюсе, ми вас
All
відпускаємо.
right,
Дякую
Bruce,
ще раз.
thank you
Я
ever so
хочу,
much.
тоді передати слово.
And I would like to, oh, sorry. Yes, go
No,
ahead.
I was just going to say thank you again for the invitation, and you all be well. You're in our hearts and prayers, and I look forward to the next chance to be with you. So until then, thank you again.
Дякую, Брюсе. Ми
Thank you so much.
сподіваємося, що наступного
We hope next year
зможемо
we'll be
провести
able to
форум
organize
онлайні
a similar
Одесі,
forum offline in
під
Odessa
українським небом.
under the
Можемо
peaceful Ukrainian
запросити
skies.
всіх
And then
наших
we're going to
друзів,
invite
всіх
all
наших
our friends
гостей,
and partners and
щоб
guests
розділити з нами ось це
to
свято
share
медіації, що
this
відбувається. І зі свого боку ми
celebration
точно
of our
можемо
job.
запевнити, що форум
The only thing we can
відбудеться
assure you that the
за
forum
будь-яких
will
умов.
certainly
Це
take
саме
place
те,
under
що
any
ми
environment,
маємо
under any
зробити.
condition, because this is what wakes up, helps us wake up in the morning and do the job.